Welcome back, everyone. It's another episode of the Fantasy Network, and you guessed it, it's your neighborhood nerd back to host again, Jimmy Nuts. And we are going over the finale of The Faithful and the Fallen saga by John Gwynne. That's right, we're going to be reviewing Wrath, and there's a lot of anticipation for this book. I can't wait to talk about it, and I think that the tagline is appropriate to say that even the brave will fall. To get this out of the way, and just to be completely frank, when you put in almost 3,000 pages of reading into a series and you're attached to the characters, you have to wrap up the story, if you're the author, in a very tight way, and you have to be able to relay to the reader all the themes that you were going throughout the book, the tone, and give a satisfying ending. John Gwynne's ending in Wrath was nothing short of spectacular. I just want to get that out of the way. Absolutely spectacular. And I'm not going to take a ton of time to harp on all the pros of the series. I would really encourage you to go back and then to watch my Malice review if you haven't yet. And then also I did Valor and Ruin all in one video because I kind of wanted to get the middle chunk of the series out of the way. So I'll put cards up top there. Make sure to check those out because I'm going to build upon what I talked about in those reviews here. So for the most part, what Wrath gave us was the setup to the final fight, the big battle, the climax of the series. And it actually slowed down the series a little bit and in the right ways. I thought he had also done that in Ruin, but even more so here. I thought the pacing was really good because we got the setup that we needed for this final scene without being boring. Like, you're actually looking at the chapters, you go, oh, this is a little more tame than usual, but like every single chapter still has bloody battles that are like incredibly descriptive. So it's John Gwynne's way of taming the story down to build up to this big climax, but it's still fun and it's still entertaining. So you've heard me say time and time again, and you'll hear other people always say when they review these books, that the combat is super descriptive, it's fantastic. You've heard it before. But I want to go over why John Gwynne's combat is so good. So on top of being descriptive, he also doesn't focus on just one piece of combat. For instance, it's not just all sword combat or knife fights or guerrilla warfare like we see in this last book. It's all of it. It's all aspects. He writes very concise and accurate descriptions of hand-to-hand fighting, which as an MMA fan and as a boxing fan, really any combat sports fan, I really appreciated, like actually going through the time to say, hey, he hit him with a jab and then a hook. It tells me that the author has done research and they're not just, these looping haymakers. He's talking about like tight technique that's so rare in fantasy, and while it's a minor detail, it takes someone like me or anybody that enjoys that medium of combat sports, and it's like, hey, this guy's not insulting my intelligence. We have pit fighting, we have grand scale battles, we have duels. And in Wrath, he focused on guerrilla warfare, kind of a Vietnam feel, where it's not a traditional sense of war. We're taking the fight and it's a war of attrition and of resources and being able to take people out, that are scavenging in the woods and just scouting and random attacks with all these unorthodox ways. I thought that was just a really good icing on the cake for me. After we've seen all these different layers of combat John Gwynne's tackled, he then tackled another one in the finale of the series, and it then again just proved to me that he is the best combat writer in the genre. John Gwynne continued the strong themes of characters here and what they're going through to reach this climax and the corruption of certain characters, and all these beautifully woven arcs began to intertwine and come together without feeling rushed, without feeling forced. It just all kind of gelled. The word I've used time and time again when reviewing John Gwynne books is that it's natural. And that's what we had. We had all these arcs intertwining and crossroads where characters that haven't seen each other since book one or have never met ever are now together. And how did that play out? And I would say it was excellent. I would say that it was very well done, and I felt like it all felt satisfying to see some characters come back together and maybe face the changes. I mean, over 4 books, the amount of variety in the characters, really the changes that they went through all the turmoil was really cool. Because we've seen it as a reader, we have this information of why they've changed, but then seeing, another character in the story then be exposed to what a character went through, just riveting stuff. I said character like 80 times there, I apologize. I think the ending battle in the climax of the scene, which was roughly, I think it was around 200 pages, if not more. I actually just ended up reading like the last, I think 200, 250 pages straight because it was so well done. It's the best climax of a series that I have read, and I'm not the most well-read person in the world, but I have read a decent amount, and I really do think that it was the best ending battle I've ever read. It had the same John Gwynne quality as all the other books did, and he wrapped up all of the books very well, but this did take the cake. It was amazing to see, you know, from book 1, 2, 3, and now in 4, the stakes just kept escalating, and it really did feel like the climax. It felt like the pinnacle of the series, and it was very emotional and very, very well thought out. And I mentioned in the last review talking about like the wildlife and how it kind of came into this landscape and the world and all the building that John Gwynn's done. And all of those aspects, from terrain, from, you know, obviously characters, but wildlife, we saw all of that come together in this conclusion. All of those pieces played a part in the final battle. It was so interesting to see how much the wildlife played in the world, that it wasn't just a good versus evil. And don't get me wrong, the overarching story, like most stories, unless if it's a Joe Abercrombie novel, is good versus evil. And I'm still a fan of that. I'm still a fan of good versus evil. I enjoy my Joe Abercrombies and my Gray characters and everything in between. But I still love good versus evil, and it did a spectacular job, a splendid job of relaying that through character relationships. And maybe even more so than good versus evil, this was a book about character relationships. And in some cases corruption, and in some cases redemption. Maquin was by far my favorite character throughout the series. You know, a lot of books have legends, right? Like we have Logan Ninefingers in the First Law, and you get the backstory of these legends, how people react to them in combat or in other situations. We got to see a legend be made with Maquin, and you don't always get that from a side character perspective. And I know Corbin is the main character of this story, but for me, I'll always remember Maquin, and Corbin's great in his own right. All these characters were great. I actually don't have a character that I disliked, but Maquin is the one that'll stand out. So it's awesome that I can read this series, and in my mind, Maquin was the main character because it's the plot or the arc that I connected to the most, and I think that really talks about the depth and the beauty of this series. And all the way through to the end of Wrath, all the way back to Malice, in this final amazing battle, the whole thing, I felt like the tone stayed true throughout the entire thing. The theme of the story stayed true, even with the twists and turns. You never felt like you were reading a completely different story from book 1. A lot of things changed, a lot of things happened, but you still felt like it was the same world, the same overarching plot, and I thought that was really cool. There's a lot of callbacks from book 4 to book 1, and I think book 2, I'm a huge fan of callbacks, so that was a huge plus for me. And as if there weren't enough pros already, I really want to talk about something. The one thing that happens in fantasy books, even movies sometimes, that really takes me out of a series is romance. I think romance is extremely difficult to relay. I think it's very difficult to write and to not come off cheesy, and also people view romance from different perspectives. It's really hard. John Gwynne's romances were believable in this book. It only added to the characters' motives and who they were as a person. It even made some of them change, which I thought was really excellent, and not in a bad way. Like I said, there's a lot of times I'll put a book down and just be like, man, this romance is killing me. Like, I just kind of skim over it because it's just so cringe. Never felt like that. It felt like a plot device that was used to enhance what was already there, and maybe change some motivations for characters. But overall, I just thought it was really well done. I thought it was like a hint of romance that the series did need, and there was no cringy sex scenes or anything like that. He kept it pretty much to the reader's imagination, and I kind of appreciate that because, again, romance is really hard to write in all aspects. Now stop the presses, because I'm actually, for the first time I think in this entire series, I'm going to mention a con. There is a lot, and I mean a lot, of someone lifting the sword, like gonna stab you, right? Like lifting it, and you think that the person on the ground is in peril and it's over, and then there happens to be a big flash of something, and then that person gets knocked away, and lo and behold, they're saved. Now, I understand that we have to protect our characters, and I don't even think having this multiple times in and throughout, 3,000 pages is that bad, but it got to the point where I noticed it. I noticed it a lot. In fact, to the most part, where I would almost kind of expect it to happen every single time that a battle occurred, and I think there were a few times where you might have expected it and then it didn't happen. So that was kind of cool, like giving me, you know, you're baiting me along and then you switch. I like that. But I think some people are going to look at that and get a little bit annoyed. A lot of people don't like that, the tease of it, whenever they know it's not going to happen. Again, it's fine sometimes. It's not a huge detract. It didn't ruin the series for me. This is still, in my opinion, a 5 out of 5 throughout the entire series. But I did want to, I want to make note of that, because for some people that's like a huge deal. I would implore you to continue reading, because I don't think it detracts that much. But yeah, a lot of saving graces. So that's probably my only con throughout 4 books in this series, but I did want to get that out there. So I know you're dying to know, do I recommend Wrath? Of course I recommend Wrath, and I recommend this entire series. I think this is going to be the go-to whenever someone's looking to read a book and they want to know what they should pick up. I'm going to say Malice and get started, and I hope they follow all the way through Wrath, because Wrath was the perfect conclusion in my opinion. I would give it a 5 out of 5, Golden Acorn Award all day, and I will probably just lump this whole series at the end of the year when I do my top 10 list or top 20 of my favorite books. I'll probably just lump the series together, because I don't want to take up 4 spots for the whole series, because it's definitely my top 10 and definitely, without a doubt, my top 20. Bravo. Bravo, John Gwynne. I think you have wrote a masterpiece here. I think that you mastered so many different pieces of what makes a great fantasy story. I think you have now put your name into the all-time greats when it comes to finishing out a series, you know, the right way. And, you know, just finishing a series is an amazing achievement. But you did not falter one bit throughout all 4 books. I thought the quality increased incrementally with each installment, and just a masterpiece. I want to thank you so much, because this series actually, you know, during all these crazy times, and I had some stuff going on with family, it was nice to get away. It was nice to go to the Banished Lands, and this series is going to mean a lot for me in that aspect, and also just as a reader and someone who likes to talk about and critique books. This is just something I feel guilty for every series that comes after this, because they're going to have to compare to this fine piece of work, and I don't know how it's going to stack up, but The Faithful and the Fallen is definitely one of the best series of all time in the fantasy genre, in my humble opinion, and I will be rereading this, and I cannot wait to get into the sequel trilogy. Man, I haven't even really been reading much since I finished Wrath, because like you spend so much time in a world, I don't want to rush to another book and then be an unfair judge to it, and I don't know, it's hard not to be kind of just emotionally drained at the end of a series that's 3,000 some pages and you desperately wanted more of. I kind of slowed down in Wrath too, because I didn't want it to be over, but it is. Man, the bar is now set very high for anything that I read the rest of this year and the rest of my life. I've also been like passively reading Fellowship of the Ring, and while reading The Faithful and the Fallen, it's been really interesting to see, you know, a modern take on the classical fantasy story. And I think John did a lot of things and turned some things on their head, but he took it and showed that it's not dead yet. There's a lot more you can do. You can bend the rules, and you can be original in this genre. You can be original, okay? I think that he has a very original story that still feels close to home. There's things where you can feel the inspirations from A Song of Ice and Fire, Lord of the Rings, even a little bit from like Joe Abercrombie possibly, but it still feels original, and I respect that immensely. So we did it. We wrapped up The Faithful and the Fallen. I thank you so much for joining me on this ride. I've had an absolute blast, as you can tell. Absolutely, thumbs up. Go get this book. Go get this series. Read it. Let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. And you guys have any recommendations for what I should read next? I think I'm going to finish Fellowship of the Ring, but I'd like to see maybe some suggestions. I'm kind of between maybe the Farseer trilogy. I'm also thinking about reading Tad Williams' Dragonbone Chair. I'm also thinking about starting Malazan. Thought about Stormlight Archive, but I think I'm going to put that on the back burner just because it's not finished, and there's so many good finished series out there. And of course, I'm going to read John Gwynne's other stuff, as you already know, but I'm going to take a little break because I don't want it to all be over so soon. So put some suggestions down in the comments. I'm trying to think of anything else off the top of my head that I was going to read. I am going to read George R. R. Martin's Fever Dream, because I think it'll be a good palate cleanser after The Faithful and the Fallen. So after I finish Fellowship, I'm going to read that and then probably start another series. Also, Dagger and Coin might be on that series list to read. So yeah, Faithful and the Fallen was amazing, and I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, keep reading, my friends.